Well, hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this wonderful eclipse that we're in the middle of. We are approaching in about 45 minutes from now, maximum eclipse. So right now we have a nice image of the moon. Just a moment there. Looks like we're just resetting the camera a moment. That should be coming back. Yes, there it is. So we're quite deep into the eclipse right now, and right around 2:03 a.m. Mountain Standard Time here in the U.S., which is 4:03 a.m. on the East Coast of the U.S., 1:03 Pacific. That should be the point of maximum eclipse. And this is a 97% partial lunar eclipse. So it's really quite close to a total eclipse. And we're starting to see in the view of the camera that really nice red color starting to come through. So just a beautiful image. I'm certainly enjoying this. I hope you are as well. As we've been talking tonight about different aspects of the moon, we're going to spend some time talking about how the moon moves in the night sky and how that has led to some interesting traditions in astronomy and in cultural astronomy. My name is Danielle Adams, and I work here at Lowell Observatory as one of our deputy directors, but I'm also a cultural astronomer. And so I study how people look at things in the night sky, especially stars. And so we're going to take a look at how the movement of the moon impacts different aspects of cultural astronomy. We tend to focus on the phases of the moon. And so we'll have a little bit of fun here looking at how the moon moves. But before we do that, we'll just keep this view on the moon. All right, looks like we just lost the moon a moment. We'll get that right back for us. Oh, there we go. Okay, well, let me share some things while we're working that out with the moon over there. Just one moment here. All right. So what you should be looking at now is a simulated view of the night sky. And we're zoomed in close here. This is a view of the moon, and you can see the simulated image. The moon is in partial eclipse, pretty well matches where we are right now in the progress of the eclipse. Now, I'm going to zoom out here. And by the way, I'm using a program here called Stellarium. This is a free and open source program that any of you who are watching can download. You can also use it on mobile devices. So it's a really great resource. Now, I'm going to zoom out here so we get some perspective of what's going on. And let me just clear those words out of the way. Okay, so we've got the moon here. This is our horizon. And the moon is quite high in the sky. And this orange line that we've drawn here, this is called the ecliptic. This is basically the path that the moon and the planets take in our night sky. And so you can see the moon is right along this line of the ecliptic. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about here concerning the motion of the moon is that the moon actually moves against the background stars. You might go out at night and see different phases of the moon, but if you look at what's around the moon, you'll see that each night it's a different part of the star field that the moon is residing in. So tonight, if we zoom back in, we'll see that the moon is quite close to the Pleiades star cluster, which is right here. Now, what happens is that the moon orbits the Earth in about 27 1/3 days. And that means that if we take 360 degrees of a circle and divide it by that 27.3 days that it takes the moon to orbit around the Earth, that means that the moon will move 13.2 degrees against the background stars for every 24-hour period. And so if you chop that into 24 hours, then that means the moon is moving about 1/2 degree every hour. The size of the moon as it appears in the sky is 1/2 degree. And so the moon basically moves 1/5 of itself every hour in the night sky. So that's pretty fast compared to the background stars of the sky. And night by night, you'll see that the moon makes progress against these stars. And it completes a full circuit in roughly a month. We'll get more of that later. But something interesting happens in many cultures around the world, and that's that you might be familiar with the solar zodiac, constellations like Scorpius and Sagittarius, Libra, etc. These are the 12 constellations that the sun passes through over the course of a year. And so the constellations are not evenly spaced, but it's often said that the sun spends a month in each constellation. That's not actually true, but on average, 12 constellations for 12 months of the year. So what happens is that you can do the same thing with the moon. So since the moon orbits the Earth in 27.3 days, then the moon can pretty much be tracked as it goes through the sky, and it can be said to stop each night in a different portion of the sky. And so over time, what's developed is a collection of 27 or 28 stars or small groupings of stars that can be called a lunar zodiac. And this is found in many different parts of the world. In India, this is known as the nakshatras. In Arabia, this is known as the manazil, or the manazil al-qamar, which means the stations of the moon. In China, this is known as the lunar mansions, or lunar houses. And this goes back even to ancient Babylon, and even is connected to ancient Egypt as well, with the 36 decans, which is a slightly different system, but based on a similar premise. So let's take a brief look at what this actually looks like in the night sky. So I'm just going to make sure that we're here in real time, and there we go. All right. And let's flip back just for a moment to that full screen view of our eclipsing moon. It's really getting gorgeous. And we can see that the moon is just really getting that beautiful red color. It's almost a pinkish color. That very bright portion on the left of your screen, it looks washed out. That's the part that is still fully illuminated by the sun. On the right-hand side, that's the part of the moon that is actually inside Earth's shadow at this point. And again, the color here looks reddish because even though it's technically in Earth's shadow, the Earth's atmosphere is refracting some of the light from the sun around the Earth to go back inside our shadow and illuminate the moon with that reddish color. Really beautiful. So let's take a look at what happens here as the moon moves across the night sky. So if we can go back to the stellarium screen, I just want to confirm. Yes, excellent. So here we've got the moon. And again, this is pretty much right now. The moon is here next to the Pleiades star cluster. But if I go up to my date and time window, I advance us one day. Now we see that the moon is next to the Hyades star cluster here in Taurus, and this bright star, Aldebaran. Now, my expertise is in Arabian astronomy, and this Pleiades star cluster was known as a Thuraya, and it was a really celebrated star cluster in Arabia. Here, tomorrow at this time, for us here in Arizona, 1:30 in the morning, the moon will be near Aldebaran. And that also comes from the Arabic. It means the follower. And it's the follower of the Pleiades because it comes right after the Pleiades star cluster. So then let's say we go another day, right? And so the moon has moved another 13.2 degrees in the night sky. And we see that it's by another star here. And it's getting almost at the level of Orion over here. And so if I continue to advance this, you'll see the moon will go step by step every day, 13.2 degrees. And so the moon, as it's going through its phases, is actually making progress against the background stars of the night sky. So this is the first thing we're looking at here, is the progress of the moon against the night sky. And remember that because that's going to come into play later on when we look at another element. So let's go back to our full screen view of the moon. And we're making really great progress again here. The eclipse is advancing. We've got this really beautiful pink color coming out. It's a bit more pink than reddish orange, and that's because it's still quite bright. And yeah, you can just see beautiful detail on that shadow side of the moon. Beautiful. We really looked out here in Flagstaff, Arizona. The weather forecast was calling for much cloudier skies, and we really ended up with a gorgeous view of the moon. Wonderful. Okay, let's take a look now. We're going to look at another element of how the moon moves, and this is an interesting one. So let me go back to my star map here. Again, I'm using the program Stellarium. That's a free download from stellarium.org, I believe. And let me just make sure I'm at our current time. Excellent. Okay, so again, this is the current view of the moon in the night sky. And the second thing we're going to look at here is that the phase of the moon determines how long the moon is visible in your night sky. And this is going to make a lot of sense. So let's actually start where we are right now. We're looking at a lunar eclipse. And by definition, the moon and the earth and the sun are lined up. And that's called syzygy, when these three bodies line up together. Now, for there to be a lunar eclipse, that can only happen when the moon is a full moon. And so tonight, right now, we have a full moon. And so what this means, if you think about it, and these different celestial bodies in space, this means that as you're looking up at the eclipsed moon if you go outside, for example, then when you're looking at the moon, the sun is directly behind you, right? So the sun is illuminating the other side of the earth right now. It's daytime there, it's nighttime here. And then the moon is passing right behind the earth into our shadow. So some people ask, why don't we have a lunar eclipse every time the moon goes, or every time the moon is a full moon? And the reason is that our celestial bodies have to line up exactly in all of the axes. And so even though every time there's a full moon, we have this event called syzygy, the moon has to also be inside the cone of Earth's shadow. So that means that if you look at the orbit sideways, then one can't be above the other. And so most times when we have a full moon, the moon is a little bit above the plane of our orbit around the sun, or a little bit below, and that's what prevents it from going into a lunar eclipse every single time. So here we've got this full moon, and so by definition, when we have a full moon, it's opposite the sun in the night sky or the daytime sky. So when the sun sets, the full moon rises in the east, and the full moon is up all night long. And when it sets in the west, the sun is rising in the east. Okay, so full moon, you get the moon all night long. Now, what happens in the other phases that the moon goes through? Well, let's find out here. So we're going to go to the very next new moon, or the very next visible crescent after an astronomical new moon. So in our simulation here, we'll just hop over to December 5th and take a look at what we get. Now we're going to have to change our time here. So we'll go through daytime. And then we can see here we've got the sun, the moon, excuse me. Okay, so we'll go to, yeah, this is good, 5:30. This is about 15 minutes after sunset on December 5th. And so you see we've got a moon here, but if we zoom in, you can see that this moon is a really tiny crescent. I mean, it's barely visible. In actuality, you might not be able to see it. It may be too faint. So let's see what happens on the next day, 12/6, a little bit of a thicker crescent. Now, this moon, if you can see the data here on the left-hand side, actually says that this moon on December 6th will set at 7:41. So with a sunset at 5:15, a moon set at 7:41, that means we've got about 2 hours of the moon after sunset, and then the moon's gone. So when we have a crescent moon, the moon is in the sky much less, only a couple hours, compared to a full moon, like tonight, where the moon is up all night long. And so this is a really interesting feature of the lunar phases. And as we go through the phases, you'll see that we've got more moon. So we can advance, say, 3 more days. Now we've got a moon that is 6 days old, and it's going to set at 11 p.m. at night. And so here we've got 5 hours, 20 minutes, something like that, before the moon sets. And so as that phase advances, the moon is up for a longer portion of the night. Now, this feature of, or this relationship of the moon's phases to the length of time that it was up at night actually found itself into a series of Arabic sayings about the moon. So I'll read a couple of them to you, and you'll get a sense here that these sayings are really referring to the length of time that the moon is visible, not as much to the phase directly. So the first one says that when it's the first night, and here the first night means the first night that the crescent is visible. So that technically could be maybe a 3-day-old moon, maybe a 4-day-old moon in some cases. And so on that first night, it's compared to a little lamb, the owners of which have rested in a small tract of sand. And so that means the little lamb doesn't want to wait long before it wants to eat again. And so that's the crescent. It's just a really short period of time. Now, if we fast forward a couple days, then let's see here. Let's try the 5th night. So when it is 5 nights old, then it's the time for discourse and sociability. And so here we're talking about a longer period of time where people can have conversations, maybe it's a few hours. As we progress through the phases of the moon, when the moon is 7 nights old, it's the night of the night journeying of the hyena, which is a longer period of time. And so now perhaps that's a good 6 or 7 hours that the hyena is journeying through the night. When the night is 9 nights old, at this time, onyx is picked up in it. And this is partly because it's so bright, but also because you have plenty of time to search for it. And then when the moon is full on the 10th night, and of course here, this is the 10th night after the crescent is first visible. So this would be a 13 or 14-day-old moon. At this point, then the moon welcomes the dawn. And that goes right back to what I said earlier, that with the full moon, it's up all night long and it sets as the sun rises. So this is just a little piece of Arabian cultural astronomy that talks about how the phases of the moon are related to the length of time that the moon is up in the night sky. So let's go back to our full screen view of the moon and see where we are. And we've got just a small sliver now of the moon, looking gorgeous. Right now, local time here in Arizona, it is 1:40 a.m. Mountain Standard Time here in the United States. So we are about 23 minutes away from maximum eclipse, which is going to be almost a total lunar eclipse, 97% towards totality. And that is just a gorgeous, gorgeous moon. Okay, so we're going to look at one more element here in the night sky, in looking at how the moon travels through the night sky and how that has impacted different cultures. So this is an interesting piece. Because the moon moves against the background stars of the sky, as we've seen before. And let me get us back to our time right now, and we'll just zoom out. There we go. There's the moon. Get that centered. Okay, very nice. So because the moon moves against the background stars of the night sky, there's something interesting that happens. The moon has this odd 27.5-day cycle in terms of how it orbits around the Earth. but its phases take 29.5 days. And that's because as the moon is orbiting around the Earth, at the same time, the Earth is orbiting around the sun. And so by the time the moon has come back to its original place with respect to the Earth after 27.3 days, the Earth has advanced in its orbit over that same period of time. And so the moon needs an extra 2 days, a little bit more than that, to get back to the same point in its phase cycle. And so that difference is part of what causes the moon's phases to progress over the course of months and years as it travels against the background stars. So that means that the moon alone is not very good at predicting annual cycles. If it gets cold every winter, if it rains in the same month every year, the moon alone isn't really good for predicting that because it's too variable. But because, as we saw before, because a crescent moon, a young crescent moon, can only appear low in the western sky, then if you watch actually a star or a star cluster perhaps, and watch how the moon changes its phase each time it passes that star or star cluster, you can use the conjunction of those two bodies to create a seasonal calendar. And this is exactly what some cultures have done. In ancient Arabia, as well as some modern areas like Yemen, Afghanistan, even East Africa, you can find what's called a moon Pleiades conjunction calendar. So again, tonight, if we zoom in here, the moon is undergoing its eclipse right near this Pleiades star cluster. So this is the view now. This is the view tonight, right? And we've got a full moon, which happens to be going through an eclipse by the Pleiades star cluster. Now, if we watched what happened next month in December, when the moon gets near the Pleiades, what would we find? Well, let's take a look here. So I'm going to go, excuse me, 1 month, and we've got the Pleiades down here. So let's back up. All right. So we've got the moon near the Pleiades on December 17th, but here the moon now is 97% illuminated. So this is what we would call a gibbous moon. It's not all the way full. Let's go another month. All right, so this is another month, and let's get the moon near the Pleiades. Now at this point, in January, the moon is now 80% illuminated. This is also gibbous, but if we zoom in here, you can see that it's moving towards a half moon. And so what you'll find is that if we advance month by month by month, every time the moon passes the Pleiades star cluster, its phase gets smaller and smaller and smaller until I'll get to the end here, right at the end of April. And let's center on the moon. Right at the end of April. Oh, and let me change the time. Whoop. Okay, so here we see that the moon is quite close to the sun. And then here at the early part of May, and let's get to nighttime. 1 more hour should do it. There we go. So now we've got a young crescent moon. This is only 2 days old. This is May 2nd, and this will be that first brand new crescent moon that we'll see joining with the Pleiades star cluster. And there we go. We've got the Pleiades there. Yeah, May 1st or May 2nd. They're kind of similar here. So basically, this shows how you can create an entire seasonal calendar just out of the way that the moon joins with a specific star as it goes through its phase changes month by month by month. So these are 3 different ways that the moon moves across the background of the night sky. And these are different ways that different cultures around the world have used these motions to tell time through the night or to tell time through the seasons of the year, all using the changes that we see in the moon. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this view from the Stellarium program, and let's catch up on where we are with our moon. Gorgeous. We're now about 15 minutes away from maximum eclipse, and we just have a tiny sliver of moon left here. Awesome. All right. Well, let me just check here and see if we've got any questions that have come in. Okay. One question, did the Arabs call it the beaver moon too? Nope. No beavers in Arabia. They are indigenous to North America. Let's see what else. There's a question, how much is the temperature dropping on the moon because of the eclipse? So the moon does not have an atmosphere. And so that means that temperature extremes are quite significant. And when the moon goes into the Earth's shadow, you basically lose all of that heat really quickly. So that would be quite a rapid change. All right. We've got some questions. Is this safe to look at? Absolutely. So we're looking at a lunar eclipse here, not a solar eclipse. And that's a big difference. So all the light you're seeing right now on the moon is reflected sunlight. So it is completely safe to look at. You do not need any kind of solar glasses. All right. Another question, why can a lunar eclipse only happen on a full moon? Okay, great question. This is because by definition, a full moon happens when it is directly opposite the sun in the Earth's sky. And so what this means is that for the moon to be opposite the sun, that means it's on the shadow side of the Earth. And so a lunar eclipse can happen only when the moon is passing through the shadow cast by the Earth due to the sunlight that's coming at the Earth. So it can only happen during a full moon. By the same token, solar eclipses can only happen during a new moon because in that case, the moon is on the other side of the Earth, the illuminated side of the Earth, and in a solar eclipse, the shadow of the moon is falling on a much smaller portion of the Earth. All right, and so we are approaching, looks like we're about 12 minutes away from maximum eclipse here, and we're coming at you live from Flagstaff, Arizona, from Lowell Observatory. And wow, we have just got a gorgeous, gorgeous moon here and a beautiful night. another question, how often does a lunar eclipse occur? So it's not exactly regular. As mentioned before, whether we get an eclipse or not depends on whether the moon is passing through what's called the nodes of its orbit around the Earth. So as the moon orbits the Earth, sometimes it's above the plane of the Earth as we're traveling around the sun. Sometimes it's below. So as the moon gets to that point of being full, we only get a lunar eclipse if it's passing through the nodes and it's exactly in the plane of the Earth's shadow. Let's see. Does the moon get as red as Mars? So the color of the moon during a lunar eclipse depends a lot on local factors. So it can appear as red as Mars, absolutely. It depends on things like particulates in the air. If you have air that has some smoke in it, you'll get a much deeper, darker red moon. Whereas if you have, say, a lot of water vapor, that will affect the color in other ways. So it can get as red as Mars, and ours is currently looking rather pinkish, which is quite a beautiful color, I think. All right. All right, so I'm going to sign off myself here, and we are going to welcome back Rezi and Sarah, I believe, together to give us an update on how we're doing and what's coming up next as we approach maximum lunar eclipse.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm on yet. Sorry.
Yeah, I can talk a bit about, because I've got my eyes on the moon as well as the camera you're seeing. Yeah, it looks real nice. It doesn't from your eyeball look this pink. I'm intentionally overexposing it so in the camera so that you can see some of the detail in the features on the moon. It's actually much darker. It is that orange color, that darker orange and even pretty dark gray that people were talking about earlier. So I think what we're going to do now is toss it over to John Compton, who will talk a bit about some of the geology of the moon, and we'll keep him apprised and let him know when we're hitting maximum. John, are you ready? Just about? Maybe.
We do have a minute maybe while John's getting ready here.
Oh yeah, never mind. He's got 10 minutes. That's my bad.
I think we had a little break in there for a second, but things got a little turned around. But
Yeah, sorry.
oh, no worries. Yeah, so I just snuck outside to take a look at this, and you're right, it doesn't look quite as pink as it looks in the video that you're taking right now, Sarah. But you can definitely still make out some of that coloration, which is really, really nice from here at least. So yeah, you can tell that we're getting really, really close. I'm interested to see how much is left of that little tiny sliver of very illuminated, that like 1% of the moon that's going to be still illuminated tonight. I haven't seen an eclipse quite like this before, so I'm excited.
Yeah. And sorry, John, I realized it's about time for us to take just a little moon break. It's not quite time for you yet. That's my bad. I got my times mixed up. So what I think we'll do is we're just going to let you watch the moon, and we will pop back on in about 5 minutes when we hit maximum, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then after that, if you want to hang out with us and watch it sort of recede from maximum, John's going to talk a lot about some fun geology stuff about the surface of the moon. So we will let y'all just enjoy, and we'll be back in just a couple minutes. Okay, everyone, it is now 2:02 in the morning, at least here in Arizona. If you're on the East Coast, you might actually be up for like a real reason. But 2 in the morning is just a weird time. But anyway, we have now reached maximum eclipse. Rez, you want to talk about what that means and what's going to happen next?
Yeah, so basically what's happened here is we have entered into, well, the moon has entered into the Earth's shadow as much as it is going to tonight. So tonight, right now, we're at about 99% of the moon is in that shadow. And what we're seeing for the most part here is this pink color, right? This happens with lunar eclipses. And what's happening is the light that is hitting the moon is being filtered through the Earth's atmosphere, right? The Earth is perfectly in between the moon and the sun. So normally the moon is, when it's full, white because of that sunlight reflecting back from the sun onto the Earth. Today, though, that sunlight isn't hitting it directly. The Earth is in the way. So that light is being bent and we're seeing all of this red. Now, since this is the furthest into the shadow that the moon will be tonight, what that means is from here, we're going to pretty much see the reverse of what we just saw. It's going to start getting lighter and lighter. That illuminated patch is going to get bigger and bigger, and it will go back to regular, normal moon colors pretty soon. So yeah, that's what's happening right now. Actually, I'm not on Mars Hill right now where the observatory is, but in my own little neighborhood, I just took a peek outside, and it's very cute. Like all of the neighbors are outside looking at the lunar eclipse. So I think pretty much everywhere we're
got about another half hour, well, not even quite, 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes of talking to do, and then we'll probably go to bed after that. But for now, I think we will turn it over to John, who's going to talk about some geology shenanigans on the moon, and really whatever he wants to talk about. So have fun.
Hey, thanks. Hey, nerds. Thanks for joining us, at the end of the stream. So definitely throw all your questions, all your remaining questions in the chat, and I'll try and get to whatever I can, whatever I know about. Most of my knowledge of the moon is the features we see on the surface and the geology, but I can touch on some other stuff if we need to. It's a gorgeous looking eclipse right now, so I don't want to use a presentation or anything. Let's just roll that beautiful moon footage, and I'll tell you a tale of the moon. This whole story, how the moon formed in the first place is a lot of what we, see on the surface. So about 4 billion years ago was the Hadean time period on Earth, right? 4.5, somewhere around there, right? And Earth was basically just a ton of lava and lightning. So appropriately named the Hadean time period, right? It was partially differentiated, which means, it started to separate into layers and things like that. And along comes this huge, other body, right? This thing the size of the Mars, right? And it's called Theia, right? Which is the name for the mother of the moon in old mythology. So it comes along and it sideswipes Earth, right? And it just blasts a big old stream of just Earth off into space, right? Glancing blow, and it kind of keeps going. So this stream of debris, this stream of molten bits of the Earth itself sort of formed a ring around the Earth for, a while, until it started to condense back down and coalesce, coming together as the orbit as the rings kind of caught up to each other. And that accreted, it formed together into the moon, right? So the moon was a piece of the Earth at one point, but it wasn't like a chunk of the Earth. It was bits of molten Earth that were splattered off into space and then kind of like coalesced in this ring. There's a couple other theories, but this is the one that has the most amount of proof behind, right? It has the most traction, I suppose. This piece of the Earth that once was, when things accrete, right? When things come together like that, they get really, really, really hot, right? And so the moon was also just a giant ball of lava at that point. Something like 10,000 degrees Celsius, right? Hot, 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 hot. And, it remained molten for a really long time. And when it formed really close to Earth. That little small moon around the moon. I will touch on that. Good question. Thank you for the questions. The moon was like a tenth the distance that it is now. So like the moon was right in our face. And so this gravitational pull from the Earth. So the moon is lava, right? Earth is lava, but it's bigger lava. And it basically stretched out the moon towards us, right? So the axis is kind of pointed our way, and it's not a huge amount, but it's basically a squished little football shape, and we're looking at it. And this is, caused a lot of the effects for how we got tidally locked and things like that. So the moon is still just a big ball of lava, though. And over time, things start to cool, right? And you start to cool these things like olivines and pyroxenes, like these heavy, they have like a lot of iron in them, a lot of magnesium, things like that. They're almost all silicates. So they start to crystallize and sink as they cool because they're heavy. And they form like this little mantle area down there. It's still pretty ductile. And then, over time, we get like these feldspars, anorthite, or anorthitic rocks start to cool, and they float to the surface, right? And you can see it on the moon. When we talk about like the highlands or those high areas, the white areas of the moon, we're talking about that anorthite that floated to the surface like a foam, and it kind of cools and solidifies into these cool ranges, right? So why do we see the other, the darker materials, right? That should be that iron rich, should be basalts and the olivines and things like that. Probably not the pyroxenes. The late heavy bombardment happened, right? So we started getting all of these impacts all over the Earth and all over the moon, big impacts, bolide impacts, all across the surface, and you can see them in these dark patches. These impacts hit, but it's still a pretty ductile moon. It's still pretty soft and squishy inside. And so we get a lot of lava, right? A lot of these sort of like, what do you call them? Like really, really liquidy flood basalts kind of start flowing out and filling in the areas. They fill in all the low-lying spots, right? So it takes a bit to cool, and it's very, very liquidy. Miss Mossmo, yeah, so is the Earth. It's awesome. The question was, wait, the moon used to be a floating mound of molten rock? Yes, indeed. These low-lying areas caused by the crater impacts and some other ones in certain areas filled in with lava, like an ocean of lava, right? And we call them the Mar, right, which means the seas, right? So you get like Sea of Tranquility, Sea of Rains, the Ocean of whatever, right? They're all named after oceans. And they were, for a long time, oceans of heavy metal lava. And they kind of smoothed it out and filled in the cracks. And you can even see in this image some little embayments, things like that, as it made little coastlines and things. And it filled in the areas. And that sort of like anorthite, that soft foaming sort of material that crystallized first or crystallized later onto the top, you can see them poking out in little island chains across the surface. So we get the late heavy bombardment, we get all these lava flows, right? And the moon is still cooling, so we start to get some other interesting features. One of them is you'll get these like little track lines kind of going across. They look like little railroad tracks everywhere. And these are from the moon, like the the moon's surface shrinking, right? And it kind of shrinks in, but there's nowhere to go. So it just kind of forms little cracks in these little zones. But then the big one, right? The big features are the new impacts, right? These more recent ones. As you can see, one down there at the bottom. You see Tycho and Copernicus pretty well right now. And these are more recent impacts, right? So they're not filled in with lava. It's not that the basalt was excavated during these earlier impacts. It's they were filled in. But now that the moon is cooled, right? It's pretty solid, except for maybe a molten-ish core of iron. I think it's a little bit debated. But these new impacts don't excavate anything. They just hit, right? And you'll see all of these ejecta lines kind of streaming off from the impact site. You can really see it well with Copernicus down there. So these ray lines are how we sort of track the ages of some of these impacts, because they lie over each other and they'll fade over time, and we can sort of see which ones happened when. But for the longest time, a lot of these craters were thought to be volcanic, right? They look a lot like a caldera. A caldera is just kind of a collapsed volcano, or a collapsed, what do you call it, mass of something underneath the surface that didn't quite breach the surface, right? And it cools, and so it collapses on the surface. It looks a lot like them, right? We see a big ring. We see terracing along the inner edges of the ring, where it's sort of collapsing in this little stair steps. And then we see in the middle this sort of resurgent peak, right? And so people thought, oh, that's a caldera. But then when we started doing research about these sort of the heavy bombardment and seeing like how big these impacts really could be, because people thought, oh, they must be side glancing. It can't be like that. But no, these were energetic hits. And so the terracing is as it sort of like collapses in on itself. And then the resurgent peak is that, you know, some of these things hit so hard, it compresses the ground in these huge areas, and it ripples the ground like it's water, and it kind of gets stuck, basically. There's some other features where it kind of pops itself back up, but we get these really, really cool craters. I know there's a question earlier about erosion on the moon. Yeah, the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, and because it's completely cooled, there's no tectonics anymore. So we don't really get the same types of erosion, right? There's no wind, there's no water, and there's no tectonics for mass motion, so nothing's kind of getting big and falling apart. It does still get impacted, and so we can get local erosion from an impact and it kind of moving off. Yeah, so we'll get bits of erosion like that, but the regolith on the moon is really spiky, sharp little grains. The regolith is basically like the sand of the moon. And so they tend to be little spiky ones because there's nothing moving them around to round them off over time. So they kind of stay put. I'm gonna look through the questions real fast while I've got a sec, before I move on to some of my other favorite lunar features. Thanks for sticking around, you lunatics. Let's see. So I don't know a lot about this other small moon that's been in the news. Couldn't really tell you. I don't believe that it would have much of an impact on like tidal effects and things like that. And one of the, there's always the question of like, if the moon is leaving us, what will happen to our tides? And the sun also has a decent amount of tidal effect on the Earth, especially from a geologic standpoint. So, we'd still have tides. They'd just be solar. Don't know when that is. So what are the darker areas of the moon composed of? And are those leftovers from when it crashed into the Earth? So the dark parts, again, are those lava fields. It's the inner surface of the moon remaining liquid for so long that it sort of sprung out of these big crater impacts like an artesian well, just like trickling up and out, and kind of filling it in. In some areas, you can see what looks like wave patterns. forming. Those are more of those wrinkle ridges where it cools and kind of deforms, because the highlands are gonna shrink in different ways than the Mar, and so you kind of get this ripply effect. They look cool though. They definitely make it look like an ocean. Let's see what else we got. Could we have asteroids from the Earth Gaia splat hiding out in space? Bits of each more and less mixed. Yeah, probably. It would have been a very, very energetic hit. It would have been something like an object 90% the size of the Earth hitting the Earth. Some stuff would have been shot out. Who knows what would have come back by now, and who knows what's still out there looming in the distance as a signature of Earth. If someone were on the moon right now at this point, what would they see from their point of view? I think they'd see sort of a solar eclipse, probably. Yeah. That's my guess. I'm a rocks guy. How do objects like moons and planets end up perfectly round? It's just gravity, right? So things want to be evenly distributed. Like, so if I build a sand castle, eventually it will kind of fall down and flatten out. And if you do that from every angle, it just becomes a ball. It's just falling in from all over the place. Is it true that the moon is female? Yeah, traditionally it was said Luna, the goddess moon and the god sun. I don't know why. Yeah, so the Earth used to have a ring, especially had a ring of bits of moon, which were bits of Earth. And even from a solar perspective, the moon is basically touching the Earth. It's really close. Like 250,000 miles isn't much. That's how far a Jeep Liberty can drive in its lifetime. Like, it's like right there. And even, at the beginning, 25,000 miles away, it's right on top of us. It's a bit of us. Let's see. Erosion, mini-moon. The moon would have had small tectonics at one point, not in the same sense that we have, where we have these huge plate motions, but just as the surface shrunk, there would have been a small amount of motion. Now, a lot of that is mostly detectable in those wrinkle ridges and things like that. But we do have a fair amount of grobens, like these horse and groben structures, which come from like pull apart features. And so the only way to get pull apart features is to have like regional tectonics going on. Have these impacts affected the rotation motion? Probably not to a detectable degree, but everything has an impact. Especially meteorites. Okay. I did not. Thank you, Dulcimerist. Is the moon ever going to disappear? So the moon is leaving us, but it's not leaving us quickly, right? It leaves at about the rate that your fingernails grow. So every time you clip your nails, think, oh, goodbye, moon, a little bit further away. But that's slowing down. So eventually, it will, it will continue to slow down, and it will find some sort of equilibrium distance away from us. We'll get less wobble. It'll be like truly tidally locked, and it'll be kind of this far away distance as it kind of orbits around us. Can the moon crash and wipe us out? Oh, I hope not. No, absolutely not. We are trying to throw it away from us as hard as we possibly can. But Earth's gravity kind of is pulling it towards us, but Earth's gravity is losing that fight, and it's slowly leaving. Nothing's going to change that. When was the last meteor impact on the moon? All the time, all the time. Little tiny guys. I think the last big one was probably Copernicus or Tycho. because those are the ones with the most sort of vibrant of the ray patterns coming out of them. I don't know much about moonstone. I think it just looks like the moon. Is the roundness of the moon an optical illusion? We see a round ball because it's the shape we want to see. No, it's pretty round, and you know the deformation that makes it a football is aimed at us, right? So if you could get around to the side, in theory, if you had good instruments, you could see that it's sort of this oblate, sort of spheroid kind of shape, yeah. Have you ever seen asteroid impacts from your telescope? Not me. I'm not cool enough. Yeah. So some other interesting features. I've got my little notes here. We've got all of these little bays in the lunar highlands, and if you take even your own telescope and go look on a clear night, you can see a lot of these interesting features. The impacts. There was a question about the other side of the moon, like the dark side of the moon, and what it looks like. So it's heavily impacted, but this side of the moon has all of the Mar, right? And a lot of that is gravitational pull, right? Magnesium, iron, heavy, and they kind of bubbled up into these really early, huge impacts. And the sort of like that, what do you call it? Like this ductal mantle area is a little bit offset towards us, and so it kind of pops out a little bit easier. The dark side of the moon looks just like a big piece of pumice. It's got that mostly anorthite, right? So it's just white rock with tons of craters in it. Why are most impact craters on the side of the moon that faces us? It's pretty well distributed, I'd say. I feel like the backside, if you look at it, you can see it's pretty beaten up. It's had its fair share of impacts coming in. Does the moon spin? It does, but so do we, right? And it rotates around us at the same rate that it spins. That's that tidal locking thing. So it's rotating, but at the same rate that it moves around us. So it's almost like it's keeping one side always facing us. And that's partially to do with some fun physics, and partially to do with it's got an offset sort of core, and it's got this stretched out, phase. So if you remember Weeble wobbles, it's kind of like Weeble wobbling at us. They just don't fall down. Yeah, so some people believe that there are other theories about how the moon was formed, but a lot of the proof of why the moon came from Earth is, and someone just asked that exact question. It is compositionally almost identical, especially to the time period when the moon was formed. I think that's most of the questions. So I appreciate your time. Ask me fun things about my favorite little piece of the Earth up there.
Okay, thank you, John. So I believe it's now time for us to wrap up the stream. Not that the eclipse is ending, but we're tired and we want to go to bed. Rezzy, do you happen to know, we had a question of when the eclipse ends, how much longer has it gotten it? Do you happen to know that?
So about the exact same amount of time as led into it. So if you were watching from the beginning of the stream, I think we started how long ago now?
That was hours and change ago. So it's probably got about, 2 hours to go out of the partial, and then it'll have a little bit of penumbral residual, but that's hard to see even at the best of times. So the good part will probably last another hour or two.
Yeah, which is cool. That's one of the cool things about this one, is that it's very long for a partial eclipse, which makes it pretty neat.
Yeah. So I think with that, guys, we will bid you farewell. Thank you for joining us on this early morning or late night, whatever whatever your life's about. And we will see you on our next stream. So have a great night, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much for watching.
comment on va ralentir la montée des eaux dans petites mesures.
Enfin voilà, je pense que c'est les antipodes.
C'est le groupe derrière tant qu'on a un système avec des putains il y avait ce rapport qui s'active en total dans les années 87. On demande le climat, sur le climat, et c'est clairement, il le savait. Mais c'est jamais trop tard. Il y avait de nouveaux personnes qui croyaient que c'était là. Ouais, mais on en parle surtout dans les années 80, il y en a qui a avec ça, on n'était pas un truc qui date de 2000.
Ça allait, bien sûr, mais ça allait un peu. Moi, c'était long time no see.
Always fun. You just stand on this side because it'll be in the middle then. Otherwise, you'll be far left.
One, two, one, two.
Yeah, I think everyone agrees.
Do you want to put yourself up?
Pardon? Si, il va venir. Est-ce qu'il va venir par où? Bah oui. R5, mais avec le... Écoute, au début c'est un peu féminin, j'ai beaucoup travaillé, mais vraiment beaucoup. Et oui, je suis content, très content, j'attends patiemment d'avoir un deuxième. Mais bon, j'ai pas envie de demander, parce que avoir une petite carte, ça va faire un 2F3 et vraiment le F5.
Still doing judo?
We only have like 2 people in our class now.
Yeah.
Me and Hervé, one other guy.
Okay. What belt are you now?
Still green. Have been for a couple of years because of the same belt.
Yeah.
Day blue.
C'est pas le même capteur.
Derrière ce bleu, les gars, ouais.
Les boutons sont dans la même place. Brown, black.
C'est pas le même capteur, mais c'est une capteur.
Mais ici, à la côte, je fais beaucoup de dose capsule. Mais ce que j'avais sur ma photo, tu vois, tu parles d'un temps graphique. Et ici, le dose capsule, sur le R5, il est ici le bouton. Et puis sur le Mark II, il est ici. Alors, le nombre de fois où j'appuyais sur le mauvais bouton et j'étais dans les menus, mais je veux dire, c'est intense là-bas, parce que le mec il parle toutes 2 minutes, quoi. Donc tu dois super concentrer. Donc, voilà, rien que pour ça, c'est. Test. Written EU is the Jérémy with AFD?
Press conference. I don't know if you started or not.
It was the beginning of December.
Did you have a good night, sir?
All good.
Par contre, j'ai vu qu'il y avait 1400 mm.
J'espère qu'il n'y a pas arrivé à 13h.
Couleur 1.4 pour enlever le 15. Ah, ça doit être.
Ah oui? Mais il est 48.
Je ne sais pas, je n'avais pas envie de savoir. Mais si je change, ça sera celui-là. Ah mais j'en fais beaucoup, tu sais, de matchs de foot. J'en fais beaucoup de matchs de foot.
J'irais peut-être comme un tel.
Mais c'est vrai qu'à 34, il faudra
Oui, vraiment bien.
C'est nouveau?
C'est une grande dernier, c'est le
Pour filmer, c'est bien, c'est pas.
J'ai pas pu filmer avec, mais j'ai des collègues qui l'utilisent assez fréquemment et c'est très stable.
Ouais.
Moi, j'ai pas encore. Depuis un peu avant la COP et j'ai fait que des photos à la COP.
C'est bien les photos.
Oui, vraiment nickel.
C'est vrai.
Non, c'est vraiment bien. Mais c'est un supplément et dedans tu as 2 batteries, une batterie pour le transmetteur. Il y a des fois ça fonctionne énormément de batteries. Non, il n'y a pas de signe. C'est pour les produits à fond. On va passer par un moteur. Si, il y a eu des petits appareils comme ça, un moteur qui avaient été possibles. Oui. Il y a plein de place ici. Oui, ça c'est bien.
How are you? Yeah, good. Yeah.
Straight now, pinning a man continually.
Yeah. Je mets mon masque quand je suis positif.
Finalement, ça sert vraiment à quelque chose ce masque, je sais pas. Le fric. Ah oui.
J'ai 3 millions. C'est 300 Bloody hell. Ça va, Derson? Elle est bien cette veste?
Non, il y a la même, le même type, mais avec des plumes dedans. Moi, j'ai pas de plumes dedans. Et Francesco Secco avait celle avec des plumes dedans, qui est beaucoup moins épais, c'est beaucoup plus fiable. Voilà.
D'accord.
Ça tu le sais. Oui, c'est pas mauvais, mais tu... Ça va être autre chose.
Looks like you'll be this way. Come in from inside out. So that means something.
That's the money shot today.
How are the Austrians going to impose this? What if I'm an Austrian who's not fully vaccinated? Austrian. I'm not going to ask him that. Yeah, the same.
I'm too old. My knees won't hold out.
I'm Austrian. Don't say that. Don't say that.
See that little face.
Don't be that person.
Honestly, I nearly cried when European Parliament yesterday. I was supposed to go for a meeting and I couldn't find the route. Like that place is a maze. It's like I couldn't. I was half an hour late.
You know what would have helped?
If you know, I just kept asking people, where's this route? And they were like, oh, it's that way, oh, it's that way. Oh, you're in completely the wrong building. Oh, right. It was just like one of those, like, yeah, I want to navigate those walls.
What we did, we was doing
it wasn't for an interview, it was just for a coffee.
Here for another round of talks with Maroš Šefčovič. Looking forward very much to see if we can make some progress this morning. Obviously our preference is to see if we can find a negotiated way through this problem. If we can't, Article 16 remains on the table.
Have you shifted on the governance issue at all?
So we are looking at every issue in this discussion. There are a large number of issues that need to be fixed if we're going to resolve this problem. That's obviously part of the discussion, but there are still really quite significant gaps between us, unfortunately.
How would you describe the EU's engagement on the ECJ issue?
So it's not an issue that we have managed to discuss very much so far. We have very different positions on it, but I note what the Taoiseach said last night, for example, that the EU had serious intent to resolve the difficulties that we're facing, and I think that's a very good thing, and we take that very seriously.
When would you trigger Article 16? Because you keep mentioning it, and you say there can be no timescale, but there has to be some sort of threat here. So what would be the trigger?
So Article 16 is a legitimate provision in the protocol. It's part of the protocol. It's there to provide safeguards in the event of difficulties, which are spelt out in the protocol. If we can't safeguard positions, the problems in Northern Ireland through negotiations, then Article 16 safeguards are there as well, and that's how we look at this problem.
But how would it help?
Sorry, I didn't catch it. I wouldn't expect any breakthroughs on anything today, but there are some issues that we're making better progress on than others. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Article 16 be a huge damage to blah blah blah.
Bread is a dangerous thing today, so I didn't taste it. Just feeling